Welcome, students. This is Anthropology 325 lecture on traditional Denaina spirituality, anthropology religion. I'm Alan Boris, and I'm talking to you from my office here at Kenai Peninsula College. There is a previous or accompanying lecture on anthropological approaches to religion, which would be good for you to watch before you watch this one. That one's pretty short. This one will be fairly long. Religion is the most difficult subject in dealing with another culture. By religion, of course, we mean the broader aspects of spirituality, not necessarily formal religion. Osgood's book didn't deal with it in as great a manner as we would like, and probably he would have liked either. We can glean other elements of religion, such as developed in this lecture from Denaina stories, Denaina approaches, other sources. But Osgood does have what I believe to be a very eloquent statement of Denaina religion. And I'd like to read it from page 169. Osgood writes, "The religion of the Denaina is a respectful consciousness of the activity of an animated semi-visible world which exists as a shadow of their own physical environment. The night creeping into a temporary camp as the long shadows wrap each occupant in a blanket of isolation is the introduction to the supernatural. The common noises of the forest sound strange. Nature is ingrowing obtrusively. In the sleep which follows, dreams are accepted as certain premonitions of consequent realities. Besides these causal and dream contacts with the supernatural, self-induced trances are a third means of transcending realities. This last is the way of the shamans." There's my campfire out on the Swanson River area, and Sammy, my dog. So we will investigate some of these ideas in this lecture, and investigate is the correct word. First, some basic concepts. In the previous lecture, the one I just mentioned, Pierre Bourdieu's concept of habitus applies. So let's look at some ideas that underline Denaina spirituality. First of all, communication. There's three equally effective forms across dimensions. We'll talk about those dimensions in a moment. What one did, it was a way to communicate, for example, to the animals. There's a story about the lynx, how to hunt the lynx, and how to kill the lynx. The lynx wants to be killed in a certain way. By doing it that correct way and not the wrong way, by doing it the correct way, you send a message to the lynx, and the lynx respects you, and the spirit of the lynx will come back to be a lynx again. Actions both to the natural world and to the human world are a message. Words, of course, are a message as well. Words had power. Words could affect things, as could thoughts. To think something was the equivalent of saying or doing it. That put a huge burden on an individual. Not to think inappropriately. To think inappropriately could cause bad things to happen. In the same way as saying something can cause bad things to happen, and the same way that actions, of course, can as well. Everything happened for a reason in traditional Denaina view. There was no such thing as a random event. A thought or an action had consequences and could affect the behavior of animals or people. In historic time, evil shaman could cause evil events. It's not entirely sure where that there was such a thing as an evil shaman in pre-contact time, but there certainly were in historic time, and later we'll have a lecture on a shaman war between good and evil shaman. Nature was animate, aware and willful. And humans were not alone, nor superior. So humans were thought of as another part of that world, of the world, not superior to animals, who could be aware and willful. Discourse and negotiation with the spirits of nature were a part of the everyday world. So these are some basic concepts that the Denaina, that permeate Denaina life, Denaina thought, Denaina spirituality, as we can detect from stories and other sources. Denaina origins, we've talked about that when we talked about archaeology, but let me go through that a little bit differently. In most Native American origin narratives there are themes, and that's on the left here. There is some original pure essence that doesn't always appear in stories, but often does. And from that, the father of the animals and the mother of the earth appear. And they prepare for the earth, for life forms. Then the animals appear, and they form a society, and they prepare the way for the humans. The humans then appear, and the world is ordered. In post-contact times, which really appear as a separate set of stories, then that balance is sometimes upset. So in Denaina stories or narratives, we have a similar theme. Nakaltani, we'll talk about Nakaltani as a kind of pure essence, exists. Gujun, the father of the animals, and his wife Kaunktajalan, the mother of everything, over and over appear. The animal father and the earth mother. That then leads to the time when the animals can talk. And Gujun, of course, is the father of the animals, and Kaunktajalan eventually presides over the place where the animals are reincarnated. Raven then prepares the way for humans. So Raven as creator is more specifically Raven as preparing the way for humans. Raven is also a trickster, to use that term. Trickster meaning having both a good and a bad side. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about good and bad, the concepts of good and bad. And so Raven prepares the way for the humans, and then is the coming of the campfire people, the Denaina. And the ordered world is put in motion. But that's upset during a time which the Denaina referred to after the whites came. So literally that's the late 1700s, early 1800s, but not severely impact until well into the 1800s. After the whites came, and before that, the campfire people. So this is a summary of Denaina origins relating to broader Native American origins. The details are different in different cultures, but the overall theme seems to be there. Another origin story, we may have talked about this before, I can't remember. The Denaina have when the animals divided into pairs. Unsa, Niña, Nita, Hija, Itatl. When the animals divided into pairs. In the beginning, they say, the animals divided up in pairs. They would talk together, and they would take one another as partners. They said, "You will be my friend." So the concept of alliances, pairs, is endemic to Denaina thought. Denaina thought, Denaina cosmology, can be divided into a number of dimensions. And this was Denaina Peter and I talked about in one of your earlier readings on Bagesh, the idea of dimensions in the sense of parallel dimensions, parallel in time and space. So the first one, no particular order here, being the human body, the human corporal self. That corporal self was perceived to be a physical essence, just as we in the Western world perceive of it, which also had a spirit, actually two spirits, had a body, breath, and shadow spirit. And that shadow spirit, or human spirit, is like unto a soul. Breath is more like health. Body, breath, and shadow spirit. So the breath is somewhat tantamount to health, and that stands to reason. The shadow spirit, though, is like a soul and was permanent. The body lived, the body died, but the shadow spirit retained itself. When one died, one became an ancestor spirit. And those ancestor spirits operated in space, in parallel space. I have had Denaina in my office here at the college. We might be talking, and they might pause for quite some time, and then resume talking and explain to me we were visited by an ancestor spirit. And so some of these beliefs are still around. Many Denaina are reticent about sharing it with the broader public, lest it be misunderstood. Ancestor spirits were not necessarily welcoming, because it was thought that ancestor spirits knew your thoughts. And that can be disconcerting, and we talked about how that was propitiated during the potlatch. The memorial potlatch was one of its main functions was to essentially apologize and make things right with the deceased ancestor. Animal spirits also operated. Animals, of course, as the physical animal, but also the spirit of the animal, a kind of soul of the animal, which also was permanent. It was thought that if the animal were treated correctly, with the right ceremony, burning the bones in the fire, or distributing water animals, fish bones in the water, was a humble ceremony that sent the animals back to the place where the animals are reincarnated, brought back again. You have to pause this. So animals could communicate with people and vice versa as well, and later we'll talk about animal familiars and how people would seek an animal helper spirit. In addition, there were other spirits not connected to humans, not connected to animals, a number, and they operated in space as well. They could be anywhere, such that a Denaina going out into the woods was never alone. We think of going out into nature as being alone, as being by ourselves. A Denaina going out by themselves were never alone. They were surrounded by various types of spirits as another dimension in their world, and we'll describe some of those. And last was the concept of Nakaltani. Nakaltani doesn't translate easily. A kind of essence, that essence that we mentioned. It's been described as pure beauty, pure truth, pure essence. Not unlike the Navajo concept of Hojo, which has similar connotations, and of course they are Denaina speakers as well. So these are connected. It is written in stories that as a child one would seek a direction in life, seek a purpose in life, a kind of vision quest that we talked about with males and females, but really a lifelong sort of thing. And once that became clear what that would be, one would seek to achieve that purpose. It could be being one of the of a pantheon, a sky reader, for example. We'll talk about the sky reader in a moment. A lot of these things are very interconnected, so it's hard to be lineal about it. Or a shaman, or the dreamer. Or it could just be being a good hunter, or a good processor, or a good mom, or a good dad. It was all a goal in life. And when one died, one became an ancestor spirit, and if one had not achieved what that goal is, they would become born again, so to speak, reborn, I guess a better term in this context, reborn, and appear reincarnated, but not with a memory of a previous life, but with a sense of what that purpose is. And that could go through several iterations. And it was described to me as that when one finally had achieved that purpose, one would die a quiet death, and that human spirit, that human soul, would go into that state of Nakaltani, of pure beauty, truth, essence. Dimensions of a Denaina world, a kind of reality. Spirits could be anywhere. Truth was everywhere. Animals and their spirits could be anywhere. So a different sort of reality. Ours is not to ask, is this true or not true? Is this right? Is this wrong? Simply to say this is how, or an approximation of this, is how Denaina viewed their world. There's a phrase, "Kaizen kun yach denek," life force that envelops a person. It's connected to the stem of a fabric-like object, a blanket, in other words, a life force that connects people. Nakaltani, then, literally the spirit that passes through us, or maybe more specifically, awareness of the spirit that passes through us. Christian Denaina today translate Nakaltani as God and vice versa, but it likely predates Christianity in Cook Inlet. A pure animating force, pure love, pure truth, pure harmony. The spirits then have names. These are some of them. They're all I could find. First, Guchun and Kuungtajalan. So Guchun is the father of the animals, and Kuungtajalan is his wife, the mother of everything over and over, is how that translates. Kuungtajalan presides over the place where the animals are reincarnated. There's a story of a man who didn't believe the stories of the elders. He didn't believe in treating the animals properly, and he's out hunting, and there's mice, probably voles, but mice running around, and he gets angry and he pours hot water on them and scalds them and kills them, killing for no reason. In traditional Denaina view, a huge error. he begins to have bad dreams, and he dreams of the place where the animals are reincarnated, and he sees a beautiful woman, Kaungta Jalen. She looks at him and says, I know you, I know who you are. Look, this is what you've done to my children, and she points to the animals that he wantonly killed and scalded, and they're horribly disfigured. And then she points, these are the animals that the people have treated correctly, and they are, as they say, putting on their clothes again, putting their furs back on and returning to the place, to the human land. And in his dream, the man sees the beautiful woman from behind, and when she turns to look at him, she turns into a big fat mouse. And he's startled, and he wakes up from his dream, and he's haunted by this dream, and he goes and tells his story to the chief, to the Geshka, and the Geshka says, you need to tell your story to the people. And so he admits his bad behavior, and he asks for forgiveness. But as the story ends, he's not himself anymore. Gujun is the father of the animals. Gujun and Kaungta Jalen appear in another story, the mouse story, again a mouse. There's a man whose village is starving, and he's described as being lazy. He's not helping as he should. The game have disappeared, and he goes out walking. Galyush, Galyush, Galyush. He walks and he walks and he walks 3 times. It's described as walking without hope, but he's walking toward the mountains. And that's significant in the story, because that's where you go to help solve problems. You go to the mountains. And on the way, he encounters a little mouse who's trying to get over a windfall, trying to get over a downed log. And he reaches down and he helps the little mouse over the windfall. And he goes on his way, and he comes to the mountains, and he comes to a great big building, a big house. And he hears a voice from inside, a deep voice, a giant's voice, saying, hello, we were expecting you. Turn round 3 times the way the sun goes. And he does that, and he magically appears inside the giant's house. The giant spirit, in this case, appears as Kaungta Jalen, the mother of everything. Yes, we were expecting you, she tells him. Soon my husband will be home. He'll explain it to you. Soon he hears thunder outside, and Gujun comes in, her husband, the father of the animals. He tells the man, when you helped that little mouse over the windfall, you helped me, and you had a good heart. So I will help you. And he gives the man a backpack with little bits of food in it, little bits of salmon and caribou and other bits of food. And he gives the man the backpack and some magic feathers, some down. He says, take this back to your people, and before you get to your village, spread it out on the ground, and sprinkle the down feathers over it, and it will become food, and it will save your people. And so he goes back, and he spreads the food out, and sprinkles the down feathers, and he goes to his people, and they eat, and they get healthy again, and they find food of all kinds. Gujun, the father of the animals. Having the right attitude is critical in traditional Denaina worldview. The barking dog. The barking dog indicates mental illness. To hear a dog barking in the woods is to follow it, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. The detached hand, kojeza, detached hand. I'll show you a picture of a detached hand. Then there is Galyush, another one of the giants, the mountain spirits. The mountain spirits are Denaina. They appear as giants or they appear as little people. Gilyak is another giant. Gilyak usually is not good. First man, Chialshin. And I don't know much about Chialshin. Doesn't appear in the stories very much that I'm aware of. Then there are household spirits. Yohitana, the little weasel. The little weasel is a trickster. The little weasel makes noises in your house when you're asleep. The little weasel was said, the Yohitana was said to be able to go into your bed when you're sleeping at night and twist your hair. So when you wake up, you have a bad hair day. He's a funny guy. I have a Yohitana in my house that collects one of my socks. I have the other sock in my drawer, and he's got a sock somewhere. And he's a trickster. He's not bad. Not real good either, but not bad. The steam bath spirit is a powerful spirit. The steam bath is also often used in cleansing, not just literally cleansing, but spiritual cleansing, and the steam bath spirit is the spirit of that place. Spirits, good and bad. Boy, I left one out here. Nantina. Nantina is the worst one. Nantina is an evil spirit. Nantina is the one who steals us. Nantina is the one who takes people when they're out in the fog. Children were warned not to go out on the beach when the fog was in. That was Nantina's breath. Nantina is related to other stories, other northern stories of evil, related to the Algonquin story of Wendigo, the Wendigo stories. Nakani is sometimes the term used in other parts of Athabascan territory. An evil monster, sometimes referred to as hairy monster, or the hairy man. There are stories today of Denaina who are said to have seen the hairy man. Hard to contextualize this, but there are fears in the northern forest, and Nantina at one level expresses that fear of dying, fear of being lost, fear of starvation, fear of many fears, and fears we have to, of course, confront. We confront our fears. We confront Nantina. Kozja, detached hand. It's actually a bear paw. I'll tell you the story of this in a lecture on shaman wars. There also are spirits of place. Denaina means people, so the Chinook wind people, the warm wind people, the glacier people, the lake people, the mountain people are the Traili Denaina that I just spoke about. Peter Kalifornsky's book and other books talk about these various spirits, the sky people, the spruce people, the Chwala Denaina. Osgood has a mention of the spruce people. You're walking in the evening, maybe the sun has gone down, and you sort of see something behind a tree and you blink and it's gone. Spruce people. All of these are described as good or bad, occupying a place where something good may have happened you get a good feeling. And there are the Chwala Denaina above tree line. There might be the Marmot people, where you get a good feeling at a place. But you also could be at a place where you get a bad feeling, sense of uneasiness. And one explanation of this is these are people who occupy a place where good things happened or bad things happened. The landscape is alive to traditional Denaina. The landscape has, I've called it the moral landscape, has stories of good and bad. If you're a Quetzaltanan, we'll talk about that soon in this lecture, you may be able to sense what happened. But if not, you just have this feeling that something may have happened there. Good places and bad places. The landscape alive. This is a bad place. This is Evil Creek, or Bad Creek, Gilitnu, over in the Lake Clark area. It's near Kijik. It is said that a priest did something he shouldn't have. I don't know the details of it. And an earthquake happened, and the creek now flows underground. And I've been there. I took this picture. It has an ominous feel to it. Evil Creek, another bad place where someone shoved a person underwater. It's near Custatan. This is the old village of Custatan. And then there's New Custatan, and that too is abandoned. And then the people eventually have moved mostly to Tyonek. And here's the creek, that creek where that happened. So this is where a man was hoarding food, and I can't remember the details of it, but people called him on it, and he killed him. And that, of course, is representative of a very evil act, a very bad act. So this is an evil place. There are good places, too. Zelskez Giant's Rock. This is a rock where a story said to have happened. One of the giants, one of the Traili Denaina, and his daughter, and she hid under the rock, and he eventually found her. I don't remember the details of the story. It's in Walter Johnson's book, one I mentioned earlier. This has a sad ending, however. A road was built. This is where the Pile Bay Road was built by the state of Alaska. And they first built it and went by the rock, and they later widened the road, and they dynamited the rock down into the canyon below. So Denaina today, who pass over the Pile Bay Road, will leave a small votive, a small remembrance, a flower, something like that, in recognition of this place. Here's another good place, Flat Rock Embedded. It's a rock in the middle of the New Halen River that flows from 6 Mile Lake down into Iliamna. And it's a very important place for Denaina people. So important that there's a song about it. And I'm going to try to play that song for you. This was recorded by John Correa in 1962, so it's a very remarkable recording. Very few recordings from that time. And it's sung by Gabriel Trifon. Here he's shown with his wife Catherine in the early 1950s. You can see the English. I'm embedded in the ground, the current wraps round me. I've been shaped by water, fish swim past me, the sun passes all the way around me. They, the birds, use me for recreation, the current flows round me, my children roll ashore downstream from me. Weathering. So, let's see if we can get this to play. I have to click my cursor to an arrow cursor, and you may have to adjust the loudness on this, but an impromptu Gabriel Trifon singing this song. So, Flat Rock Embedded, one of the good places, part of the moral landscape of the Denaina. So the Denaina also had sort of a pantheon of both spiritual characters and, in some cases, with the exception of the last one, individual Denaina would seek these roles. The shaman, Elikan, the shaman, who it's expressed belief in things one can see. And related to that, the Quetzaltanen, who sought Quetzaltani, belief in things one cannot see. So these were roles that people sought. The shaman, of course, was a healer. The shaman dealt with many maladies through herbal treatments and other treatments, but also what could be called spiritual healing, setting the stage for the right mindset to be healed. Katsitsin, the dreamer, a clairvoyant. We'll talk about some of these separately. We'll talk more about the dreamer here in a moment. The Yuk, Nildanen, the sky reader, the one who foretells natural events or animal movements. The doctor, the prophet, the one whose words come true. The prophet was said to have lived away from the village because they might say something that they inadvertently and would taken to be coming true, but really wouldn't. And presided over by the Gashak, who is a powerful sort of medicine priest figure. Interestingly, Gashak is an Alutiiq or Yupik word. So it was often described as the Gashak and the men with Gashak, although these could be women as well, who were in a village. Maybe every village didn't have each one of these, but individuals would seek these powers and function for these various very important roles. The sky reader, to tell about natural events, said to be able to feel barometric pressure changes, to look at the sky, tell what was going to happen, predict animal movements, healing, all of these things reflected in this pantheon. So they appear in stories, and as well there are individuals who would seek these particular roles. True belief then, Quetzaltani. So you have an article on this. So a Quetzaltanen is belief in things one cannot see. The quest to become Quetzaltanen was mentally torturous. It was a spiritual quest, and only a few would take this course. A man or a woman could do it, but not children. Peter Kalifornsky wrote, "Once you begin, there is no turning back. Turning back is even more dangerous." He wrote further, to try to become good is dangerous. Struggling against evil is dangerous. In the quest, he wrote, they began to have nightmares and they would suffer for a long time. Then finally they would become what they were trying to be, a Kecheltanen, a true believer, a powerful spiritual state. If one were Kecheltanen, one could sense and maybe even communicate with animals. One could sense the events of a place. One had a powerful spirit. One could confront evil. The details of the quest are not known. We know it involved fasting. It involved seeking an animal familiar, an animal spirit helper, and the ability to move back and forth from what you might call everyday space to spiritual space, a kind of liminality. But as far as the actual details of the quest, that has not been passed on to the broader public, and probably it shouldn't be. It's a powerful state. So the concept of good and evil, I want to get this all on the screen, I got a little too fancy here. So Peter Kalifornsky wrote, there is good and bad in all things, and that's a concept that pervades many of the stories. We have a tradition in Western literature, for example, of a protagonist and an antagonist, a good guy and a bad guy, if you will. A writer named Diamond has said that harkens back to one of the first stories like that, of a good protagonist and a bad antagonist, is the story of Job, in the biblical story of Job, confronting evil. And most, or not all, but much of our movie mythology and novel mythology involves that kind of concept. The Denaina, however, viewed good and bad in all things. No one person, no one thing was all good, nor all bad. Certainly the idea was to enhance the good and suppress the bad, but even if you were good, you always ran the risk of turning bad. And I guess you could also say that a bad person could become good. Nelly Chikaluzian wrote that we didn't know about absolute evil until the priests came. The idea of absolute evil being a Judeo-Christian concept. Indeed, Gujun, we already talked about Gujun as the father of the animals, a noble and important thing, a spirit, an origin spirit. But in some stories, Gujun appears as an avenging killer, has a gold axe, which is very unusual, a gold club, a very unusual thing, the only time I know of gold to appear in Denaina stories. And he appears as this avenging killer. So, good and bad. Not all good, not all bad. Good and bad in all things. Thought could occur through dreaming. So the belief, the belief was that the subconscious is capable of cognitive thought. And one way to think is to think through dreaming. Peter Kalifornsky, for example, I know would seek that. He would go to bed at night with a problem on his mind, and he would have a little pad and paper by his desk, pad of paper and a pencil, and try to dream the solution to something. It might be a story that he was working on that he hadn't heard for maybe 40 years, and he couldn't remember parts of it, and he'd try to dream parts of it. He literally would seek that through dreaming. And that subconscious was thought to be capable of that sort of cognitive thought, and he might dream it, and he'd write it down and sleep better. Thoughts are also said to have power, and we already talked about that, the idea of thoughts with power. So dreaming is not necessarily something mystical. could be, but it is not necessarily a... The dreamer would seek certain clairvoyant-like powers, trying to foretell future events. The dreamer also initiated some cultural practices, was practiced in divination, using a porcupine hip bone to determine future events. This isn't meant to be literal. The hip bone was a prop, so to speak, through which to convey something the dreamer detected. Others could use this mechanism. So here's something what I think is happening here. The environment, the broader environment, we detect, we see things, we hear things, perception, we smell things, we touch things. And that information is conveyed to our conscious, but also very likely conveyed to our subconscious, where it does not have ready access. It has ready access to the conscious by definition. But through dreams, we can convey that subconscious to conscious. I had a woman in my office a number of years ago who she was an athlete, and she had dreamed. She was distraught. She had dreamed that the little boy, the son of her coach, was going to die, and about 8-9 months later he did die, and this naturally just destroyed her. I mean, what was going on? And I think something like this was going on. She saw something about that little boy. Didn't look good. Didn't look well. Something might be wrong, and no one talked about it. And that got stored in her subconscious, and then she would dream, this is going to happen. And then when it does happen, it's not some mystical thing. I don't think it kind of conveys back to her perceptions, and she may have been wrong about it. You can have a dream and the person doesn't die. That could happen too. So it's not a sure bet thing. But the dreamer sought that. He sought that out. He tried to hone those abilities to see and detect information through dreaming, and then convey it to the people. Animal familiars. So as far as I know, most cultures in North America have something like this, an animal familiar. A helping spirit. This is misconstrued often. I'm going to show you a picture toward the end of this lecture of it being misconstrued. In Denaina, anyway, the animal familiar was a helping spirit, but one dealt with it cautiously, because the power of the bear, the power of the wolf, the power of the eagle, the power of whatever animal became your helping spirit was a powerful force, and that could be misunderstood and misused. So one didn't use that helper lightly. It was only in very severe cases one did. But people would seek help from their animal familiars, from their animal spirit. Fasting, praying, 3 sips of water. I want to read you a story that illustrates that. So this is in Peter's book. It's on page 169, and I'll try to read the story, the English version of the story well. The woman who was fasting. A young woman who was fasting said, quote, "People will learn something from our beliefs." As she spoke, she drank 3 sips of water. This woman had 3 brothers. They were strong. One day, some people brought in a very large porcupine. One of them took the thigh bone to the brothers and said to them, "Who is strong enough to break this?" First the older brother tried, and then the younger brother tried, and then the other younger brother tried. No good. They said, "This bone cannot be broken." The younger sister was in a corner in a bed behind a curtain. She was listening. She sipped 3 sips of water. She sipped water 3 times and then came out. "What are you doing? Give it to me," she said. They were all embarrassed, but they gave it to her. She put the bone between her legs above her knee. Grasping it in one hand, she broke it in 2. She tossed the pieces to the people who had brought the bone, and she said to them, "When we pray and we fast, there is another dimension." So she would have been, if not, on her way to becoming Ke'etchaltanan, one of these powerful spirits. Fasting was important to all of that. Fasting was a spiritual experience. Praying was a way of communicating. Praying not to a higher power, but praying, communicating with the other forces of nature and the spirits of nature. Taking 3 sips of water was a way to move into a spiritually strong space. Peter Kalifornsky would describe it to me as bending down on one knee by a river or a lake and gently dipping out 3 sips of water, and that moved one into that spiritually powerful dimension. Presumably everybody knew about this, and everybody could use this for whatever reason that they needed. Luck. So luck. Luck is conceived of as a force rather than a random event. We are said to have good luck, like you go to gamble in Las Vegas or wherever and you hit the jackpot and you had luck, but it was random. And it was random in that case. The Denaina, however, perceived of luck more like gravity. It was a thing that existed. And one could, by having a correct attitude and one having the right beliefs, one could sort of tap into that luck and it would help them. They would find what they call a lucky agate or a lucky stone. Here's the agate I found on the beach. That's described in Osgood, and Peter Kalifornsky has a description of it as well. A lucky stone, which was then you'd keep, and that would be sort of an amulet of luck. So different Denaina modes of thought. Many of these we've talked about. Cognitive thought, I don't know what other term to call it. Observation, cause and effect, introspection. All of these things would be normal, but also things that the Western world considers not normal. Clairvoyant type thought, extrasensory perception, information not easily attributable to one of the senses, prescient dreams, dreams about the future. All of these were considered normal among the Denaina, as was precognition, awareness of something happening before it happens. This is sometimes explained by an offset in those dimensions we talked about earlier. Being aware of an animal before you see the animal, for example. Teleportation. Some of the stories talk about the shadow spirit moving into a different realm. Shamans were said to be able to do this. Telepathy, transporting thoughts over space. Psychokinesis, moving objects through thought. There are descriptions of sort of battles of moving things, or of things appearing without any reason. Psychometry, detecting characteristics or attributes of someone or something or some place because of what they handled. Bagesh is that idea. So these would all be part of the normal world. So they're not nuts. They're not crazy. Cultures don't exist for thousands of years by having psychological problems an endemic part of the culture. These were considered normal. And so we don't want to think about it in a condemning sort of way. We want to think about this as how can we understand. And the subconscious had reality. It was not lack of reality, and is considered the intellectual equivalent of the conscious. And that's an interesting idea. I think it's safe to say that we do not consider the subconscious or our subconscious as the intellectual equivalent of our conscious self. Modes of thought. A word on culture-bound psychoses. Order, and in terms of order and disorder, I got my dog here, or a dog. It's not my dog, a friend's dog. So order is maintained by individual actions and attitudes. We talked about that. Many of the stories talk about the importance of having the right attitude. And disorder then occurs by improper attitudes and hence improper actions, or the will of an evil shaman. So order and disorder. It required close control of thoughts and attitudes toward animals and others to maintain order. And some could not control those thoughts, at least as portrayed in the stories, or could not resolve them through the ritual actions, and they would become insane. And it was described in the stories as he was not himself anymore. And that manifested itself sometimes in hearing a barking dog, one of the spirits. And a person would hear that dog barking. They, of course, are hearing it in their head, voices, and they would walk toward that sound of that barking dog, which, of course, didn't exist. And if they were not, if it was not found out and people went out and brought them back in, and then, of course, they would die. So this is one interpretation of this. This is a form of psychodrama. A person not being able to explain their problems or otherwise resolve their problems. And so they engage in an activity that is essentially saying to their family or to their villagers, come get me, bring me back. I've got a problem. I can't express it. There's something wrong. And so bring me back. And so engaging in this aimless walking out into the woods, really wanting the people to bring them back and then to resolve the problem. So this is one form, one culture-bound psychoses. It's culture-bound because it's unique to the Denaina and possibly other Dene cultures, who it would not be something that would be, for example, in our modern Western culture, because we don't believe that thoughts have the same power. Thoughts have power, but not the same level of power as words. And the words not the same level of power as actions. And so we have other culture-bound psychoses, but not this one. And but this one would be one of probably several that would have been unique to the Denaina. I want to end, we've covered a lot of different things here, but I want to end with talking about how indigenous cultures' belief systems, spirituality can be misconstrued. 3 examples. First, the wolf, the animal familiar. you may or someone may seek an animal familiar in our modern world, but it doesn't mean the same as, in this case, the Denaina animal familiar. Don't expect it to. You're of a different culture. And this illustration in the upper left is sort of that random off the internet expression of the wolf in this case as being the seeking the wolf, and the power of the wolf as an animal familiar. Wouldn't be the same as a subsistence culture like traditional Denaina. So symbolic violence is what? I should have mentioned that, sorry. That's another concept of Pierre Bourdieu. Symbolic violence is taking another's symbols in the broadest sense of the word, capturing it, redefining it, recontextualizing it, and therefore robbing it of its original meaning, and it's a form of dominance. Sometimes it's inadvertent, often inadvertent. A lot of New Age people who want to have the power of the wolf or the bear or whatever as an animal familiar, they just are seeking something. But sometimes it's conscious, it's purposeful, and it can be a way of dominating indigenous people. In the lower left is Rascal Raven, which was adopted as the symbol of the Arctic Winter Games in Kenai in 2006. The Arctic Winter Games are sort of a mini Olympic type thing for northern people, and they are held every, I think, 2 years. Big deal. Teams from Alaska, the Yukon, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, Greenland. There was a Sami team. I think a Quebec team as well. So as they do with the Olympics, they needed a symbol. And so somebody in the notes of the Arctic Winter Games Committee said, well, we should use raven. And somebody else, to their credit, said, well, we better be careful there. We should ask the Kenaitze tribe. So they wrote a letter to the tribe, and the tribe deliberated it over quite some time. They requested the use of raven as the symbol for the Arctic Winter Games. The tribal council wrote back, we do not own raven. No one owns raven, but raven is very special to us, and we ask that you not use raven as your symbol. Again, back to the notes of the Arctic Winter Games Committee, someone said, well, they didn't say no, did they? So Rascal Raven was born. So they used raven, this important symbol, this creator symbol, dressed up in this tacky little outfit, to be their symbol, a kind, in my mind, of symbolic violence. Another one here is, what's her name? Shoshana Avery. Shoshana Avery does workshops in shamanic healing, particularly in Alaska. But I just, in preparation for this, noted that she now has moved to Florida, where she was originally from. But she would do apprenticeships in being a shaman, spiritual counseling, New Age stuff. Here's her workshop, shaman workshop. This is one of her basic workshops. Pulled this off the internet. This workshop is about learning the basic shamanic journey, method, upper and lower world journeys, connecting with teachers in animal form and teachers in human form to help you gather information and to do healing work on yourself and others. You will also learn a divination technique. 2-day workshop with lots of journey practice. Pay now. I don't know what it costs. I didn't quite dare to click that because, well, I don't know. To me, this is symbolic violence. It's taking indigenous beliefs and recontextualizing them in a way that robs them of their original meaning. You may wish to do something like this, or Shoshana R. Avri may wish to do something like this, but don't call it being a shaman. You're not even close. So these are all ways in which indigenous religion, and in this case Denaina religion, are misconstrued. So I hate to end on that sort of negative note, but I will. I hope I hope this has helped you understand something about indigenous Denaina religion, and preparing for and these sort of things helps me understand better, and I thank you for your time.